resonate.
Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. This is an episode of Ask George, and we are going to talk about real stuff as we always do. These are just my favorite episodes because we're always patting ourselves on the back by the end of it. We're like, how are we still podcasting about this and still pulling out gems that are new that our audience hasn't heard? So a little self-congratulatory at the beginning and self-indulgent. I apologize for that, but I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're talking about a topic today that I would think a lot of our audience needs, which is this idea of building leaders in your practice. And, I think that, I had a really good analogy once told to me about the process of case acceptance, where case acceptance is like rolling a ball up a hill. And you got to get the patient aware of the concern. That's a push. Then you've got to get them to understand what happens if they do nothing. That's another push. Then you've got to get them kind of clear on the financial and, just the treatment process of moving forward with treatment. That's another push up the hill. And all of this is to get the ball to the top of the hill where they say yes. And then the ball starts rolling down. You collect payment, you do treatment, you bill to insurance, and then, we're done with that procedure. And, there was this analogy where it's like, every patient, think about it, if you're checking for 2 hygienists, you're seeing 16 patients a day, and maybe 40% of them you got to roll that ball up the hill. If the dentist is doing all of the work and is making the patient aware and talking about all of the steps required for the patient to say yes, it is going to be exhausting, and ultimately you're going to do less. And the same thing is for practice growth, right? If you have, to grow a practice, there's many balls that need to go up the hill. And there's procedures that you need to hold teams accountable for. There's training that needs to happen. There's all types of stuff that needs to occur on the management side to effectively run and grow your business. And so I want to extract that same mentality for our episode today, which is I think dentists a lot of the times have a hard time delegating to their teams and empowering their teams because they don't do it as well as the dentist does, right? And so it's hard to let go or to pass off. And the thing that I really want to talk about and want to really encourage our audience to do is I really want to encourage our audience to realize that you can't roll the ball up every hill, the boulder up every hill. You need to have your team carrying that weight with you so that as a team, we're all pushing in the same direction so that me as the dentist, I can do less and have my practice do more because we have other people supporting. And that's going to require you to build leaders and build a sense of ownership and empower others in your practice. And so that's going to be the topic today. And so, Richard, that's my introduction to the topic. So now maybe kind of take us away with, I think let's start with the problem, right? Let's start with, I would imagine a lot of people here listening are like, all right, easier said than done, but my team's not capable. I don't trust them with this. It's too important, right? There's all of the reasons why people don't do this. So maybe we should start there and kind of understand some of those beliefs and try to maybe create new beliefs or break down those beliefs and help our audience maybe reframe some of their current perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, this came up 2-3 days ago. I was talking with a guy who's in a different industry. He's a mortgage broker, but he was like, I've built my practice like you guys do, where I have people handling everything else that I can't do so that I can do the stuff only I can do and provide the value that is the highest value for my time. And he's like, it took the concept of, if someone else can do this at 80% quality of what I can do it, then it is worth delegating. And I think people struggle with that, especially because the perfectionism, the control, what's at risk, it's my business, all these things. But if you look at it the other way around, the things that are not delegatable, so clinical dentistry as the dentist, what percentage can your team member do that? 0% out of 100%. Like, this is something they cannot do. And therefore, you have to delegate the things that they can do in order to do more of the things that they can't do, including being home with your kids, being a parent, like not being at the office for an extra 2 hours every night. Like, there is cost it has to come from somewhere. That time that you're not delegating and leading your team, or you're not allowing others to lead. And the other side of this is a skill. Leadership is a skill. Case acceptance is a skill. Being a good administrator is a skill, and it can be taught, and it can be simplified. It can be systematized so that, go back to like McDonald's, the original fast food chains, that they broke things down into such simple systems that it was very clear what needed to be done and whether you did it right or not. And so, can we do the same thing for leadership for our team? And that's the goal, is what are the fundamental skills involved with leadership, and can I set up systems to help my team be very successful because they're just following the playbook?
Yeah, and Richard, I think you brought up something that, that 80% as good is. I think that we've maybe dentists have heard that a few times,
Yeah.
but I think that's an easier said than done thing.
We don't believe it.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a patience required, right? Like I think that maybe you've tried to pass something off. So like, let me use a very tangible example of like, one of the things like adjusting a crown before seating it, right? That's something that a team member can do, right? They can check the contacts, they can check the bite, they can kind of like do those adjustments and get it ready for the dentist to come in and do the final check before we cement the crown. But then every once in a while, they're going to shave off the contact. And then all of a sudden, they're a little green, they're learning this for the first time. Think about yourself back in dental school, right? Like, and then you come in, you're like, what the, like, now I got to send this out to the lab and I got to
Right.
come back and I got to tell the patient, I'm like, this is also bad. This is why I don't delegate, right? Like those types of things are going to come up in reality. Is when you go to offload things to your team, you're going to notice the drop off between where you are on that ability to do that thing and where they are. And I think that we need to also introduce in this conversation patience. Like
Yep.
you need to have a commitment to this process that you say, all right, I get it. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I had this very specific story happen to me. I was trying to get an assistant to level up and do more. And, she over adjusted a contact and then the contact was lost and I had to send it back. And I had to have an uncomfortable conversation with the patient. And the patient left, got their temporary back on, and we sent it back to the lab. We came back. And it's like, well, that's the cost of building a team-led approach, is that there's going to be times where the team messes up, and there's going to be times that you learn, and you have to be more committed to making that happen in your practice than you are in getting avoiding every possible bad outcome that could occur from people learning and making mistakes. And so I think that like from my perspective, like what would stop me is like I might try. You might listen to this episode to get excited about the idea, and then you try to give something to your team. You're like, oh, they messed it up. This is why I don't do it. All right, I'm back to doing it. Like it's so much better this way. And it's like you have to kind of know that this isn't going to be the smoothest and easiest process at times.
I like that framed as what you just said. It's like maybe they start at 70% as good as you, and they're
Or
working their
50.
way up. Yeah, or 50%, and they work their way up to 80%, and maybe over time they're 85, they're
Yeah.
90%. And the expanded function dental assistants that I had in the Army, they were better than my amalgams. Like their amalgams and their composites, I was like, I trust these dental assistants who this is all they do. They fill all day long. And so we assume that like only we're going to be the best, but the reality is you can move people up this. But I want to now kind of go back to operationalizing leadership, because we're talking about
Yeah.
leadership, not clinical dentistry. Um, and so I almost want to ask, like, what do we mean by that? Like, what is the leadership that is delegatable?
Yeah. So I think that the first and simplest thing to talk about is the office manager, right? I think that the administrative load of running a dental practice has a lot of things that can be delegated. So
Hmm.
running payroll, holding people accountable for tardiness, managing vacation, sick time, all of those things that come up. Hiring, putting out ads, interviewing people for positions, all of those things that you do that are running your practice, those are office manager. A lot of them are management, right? And so those can be delegated to an office manager. And then you have department leads is like the next layer of leaders. So you have a leader assistant who's going to be handling your ordering, your stocking of supplies, the way that you set up rooms, training assistants, all of those types of things could be a lead assistant. And then you have a lead hygienist who's going to manage the way that hygienists diagnose or co-diagnose alongside dentists, the way that hygienists diagnose perio, the way that we handle a new patient visit, the way that we hire and onboard a hygienist, right? So I think that those are like the three buckets that I would kind of put into office manager, who's kind of the front office lead, your lead assistant, and your lead hygienist. Those are like the leaders that you could really be building within a single practice. And I would say that the first step is an office manager. And, that step makes the most sense if you are either trying to like really push yourself as a dentist and use all of your time in the highest and best use of performing clinical dentistry, or if you are looking to bring on an associate or grow your practice beyond a single doctor, like that's time for the hygienist, or sorry, time for the office manager. And then on the flip side, the leads, I wouldn't get a lead unless you have three or more of a specific position. So if you have three assistants or more, then I would get a lead. If you have three hygienists or more, I would get a lead. But it's like if you have two and one of them's the lead, like that's just, you just over infrastructure. You have too much leadership in your practice for the size of team you have. And so I think that, but really I think these leaders, what they should be doing is they should be taking your role as the owner in these specific areas and serving that role so that you can either have more work-life balance or you could be more clinically productive in the time that you're at the office.
Um, this is very concrete, and it's like if you have an office manager, a lot of people have an
Someone
office
called an
manager,
office manager.
yeah, that is not doing these things. Um, and it comes down to start making a list of what are all the things that you do that
Totally.
aren't clinical dentistry, um, and be also clear on what are the things that are not going to be delegated. And I think this goes back to like some people try and delegate some of the CEO stuff of marketing. Marketing is one that like
Yeah,
I would not hand that off to an office manager
definitely
if
not.
you're just starting an office, because that's the deployment of capital. You are putting money into the world in order to get an ROI of patients in return, and it's their management. They're not making decisions around buying equipment or expanding or not, or initially metrics and what we're tracking and what systems we're building, what we're focused on. So be very clear about, here are the things that I'm doing, um, that I don't want to be doing, or maybe here's the problem, I like doing but I shouldn't be doing because they're not the best use of my time, and order them from either most impactful down or
Yeah,
most
can
stressful.
I put in something here? So
Please.
I watched this video like coming up on 10 years ago, and it was a strategic coach video from Dan Sullivan. And he talked about how he advocates entrepreneurs do a schedule audit where they look at A, B, and C tasks. And so, Richard, when you're talking about like writing down that list, he would suggest, and this is what I love to do, is I say, these are A tasks, these are B tasks, and these are C tasks. And you say, A tasks are the things that are your highest and best use and the things that give you energy. So the
Mm,
giving you energy is a huge piece, because it's like if you do things in your business that you love doing, then you're going to be doing more things in your business. So there's like a positive momentum that comes from spending your time in things that you enjoy. Then B tasks are like the total neutrals. They're like, fine. It's like they're a wash. I don't mind it. I also don't love it. And then the C tasks are the things that you dread or drain your energy. And so he talks about how the two adjustments to make is to do more A's and less C's. And so the C's, the things that drain your energy, you hand those off to your office manager, and then you spend more time on your A's, and then the B's just kind of leave them alone, and eventually they'll probably become C's. And so, that's just kind of the way that he talks about it. And I've always loved that attitude where it's like,
yeah,
I really want to be spending my time in the places where, talk about zone of genius. Like, I really want to spend my time where I'm in my zone of genius. And
yeah.
that's something that's like a really important thing for dental practice owners to be thinking about. Where am I at my best? And spending as much of your time in that as possible.
You just like to have fun, and this
Yeah.
is fun. This is where business absolutely can be. And I just saw I was going through my emails last night on the flight back, and there was a Hormozy email, and I'm now a fanboy, so people are going to hear his name come up, talking about the biggest risk to businesses is that the founder gets bored or hates their business 3 to 7 years in. Um, and like that is the biggest risk, like that they have taken on too many of those C's and assumed that they are not delegatable, and they aren't doing A's. And
Yeah.
so I love your framework. I think it's a very high yield place to start, because it's hard enough to also then be doing the stuff that are not our zone of genius and we really hate. Start with that all day every day.
And so let me tell a funny story. So I was doing this exercise as a practice owner, a new practice owner, and there was a constant theme with my C's. They were detail-oriented, repetitive tasks.
Mm,
That is a C for me. Anything that is a detail-oriented, repetitive task, I really don't like. I find it very draining, and I'm just not a detail-oriented person. And so you almost feel this guilt passing that off to your office manager. You're like, I'm just like giving her my C. Like I don't like this. I hate this. And I'm
right.
just like, you do it
Feel
now.
bad.
Yeah, it's like you do the thing that I don't want to do that drains my energy, and it doesn't feel good, right? But then something really weird happened where my office manager's like, I love this task. And she loves her A is repetitive, detail oriented things. Like she really just likes to get in the routine, just kind of like focusing on the same thing, but it's like very detail oriented. And for some reason, she really likes that. And
Yeah.
so I think it was the time that I learned that like your C's are someone else's A's. And so it's like you really should try to pass off the C to somebody who does want to do the thing.
Mm.
And I think like for a good clinical example of this was when I got expanded function dental assistants in Arizona. We can do this. And so my dental assistants started placing composites. And, most dentists, that's like a C clinical item for them, is like the process of actually putting the filling in. And like, I was like, my dental assistants were like, it's just the best. It's so much fun. It's her favorite part of her day is placing composites. And it's like, to us as dentists, that's like really unrelatable, but that's just kind of the reality of what's in your office. And so, don't just pass off the C's, pass off the C's to others who want those tasks or are naturally inclined to enjoy them.
And I would say if you have an office manager that doesn't enjoy any of the C's that you pass off,
They have
and
to do it anyway, but yeah.
they have to do it anyways, number one. But like over time, you're like, why is this person office manager? Like
Yeah.
if they are not eager to take things off your plate and they're not good at the things that you're not good at either, then you're not complementing each other, and maybe it's not a good fit. So that's a longer term conversation, but from there, I love, and stop me if you're not ready to move on to this. I love the framework of document, demonstrate, observe. So it's like
Yes.
uh, where the first thing you do is you do it yourself and document every little teeny step of it. And you then want to do it again sometimes and like pretend like you just have never done it before, and you only follow your instructions. So it's like you're double checking, are my instructions dumb enough to give me exactly the result I want? And then you want to demonstrate, you want to show this to your team member and then observe them do it for the first time. And what you want to reinforce is not did they get the job done, it's did they follow the checklist. And if they follow the checklist and something breaks, that's actually reinforce that and say, okay, great, we need to go back to the checklist. This wasn't clear enough and we need to update it, because this is what we do is we create processes that can be followed repeatedly. And then it becomes easier and easier to delegate. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that framework?
I totally agree. And I think that one of the things that is going to be a very recurring concern, right? We're trying to relate to the dentist in this episode that this is unnatural to, right?
Mm,
They like to do everything themselves. They don't like to delegate. They don't want to empower others. And we are trying to convince them in this episode otherwise. And so I think that for that type of dentist where you might have some challenges is what is obvious to you is not obvious to others. And so
yeah.
you're going to be like, all right, do this task. And then they're going to do it and they're going to miss a really important part of the task. You'd be like, what? how could you possibly not know to do blank? And then it's like, it's so obvious to you, but it's not obvious to them. And so it's really hard for somebody who's not a natural delegator to relate to the types of things that need to be documented. So when Richard said document every little thing, he really means like over communicate what's necessary here, and even put like some examples of what good is and what bad is, so
Mm,
that like you can like like you have to really try to be clear. The more clear you are, the higher of chance of success. They want to please you, right? The staff, in general, their worst days are the days where you're not happy with what they did, right? They're going to take that very personally and not going to be pleased with your negative feedback. And so there's a desire on their side to do the way that you're looking for. But the problem is that's not maybe what's obvious to them. And so you need to make what you're looking for obvious. And that oftentimes is doing it like what Richard's describing. Do the task yourself and really truly document every step and everything that needs to be considered, and then do it again following your documentation and then adding to it. And doing that and then over observing somebody and stopping them, also a great step. So Richard, I think you have a great framework, and I think my only comments are really just for the dentist who really struggles with this, is just trying to really help them understand that like this is going to feel unnatural, and it's stuff is going to seem obvious to you, but it will not be obvious to others. And so you just need to really, really keep that in mind when you're putting together your processes.
one like very like what is the fastest way to do this the first time? I would say that it's a computer based task. You're creating a job listing. It's like, okay, let's assume we already have the job description, and it's like, how do we create this job listing, post it on Indeed, record yourself on the computer and narrate each step, and now you have a recording. They can watch that over and over. It's got each step said out loud. You could then document that and put it in like a Google Doc or some other format if you wanted to, but that's a pretty easy way to document very clearly simple steps and not have to reteach and reteach and reteach. And I do this with, I've got right now team members in the Philippines. I've got one in Serbia, like, and I'm creating processes that I record every step and show. The other thing you can do is, like, if it's on your phone, you screenshot something, you circle the button they click, and then you go to the next screen, you screenshot again, you circle the button they click, or point an arrow, to where they need to go. That's the level of documentation when it comes to digital stuff. And then if you want to have it written, the equivalent of then look for this and click this, or then do this step, drop the check in the end of day check in the mail at the bank, and yada yada yada. Like, there's so much fruit in just documenting this super well, and it doesn't have to be really hard.
And so I think we've talked a lot about delegate. And, I think this episode we're talking about, right, building leaders. And so the thing I want to transition to is that sense of ownership, right? Because that's going to be the thing that you're going to have to create in your entire team, not just the leaders of your team, right? You need to have leaders that you've empowered. We've talked about the lead assistant, the lead hygienist, the office manager. You also need to have documentation and processes that are passed off and organized. You need to have a system for passing things off, the A, B's, and C's. We talked about all of that. But culturally, you need to have a sense of ownership, right? And that's not just the leaders, that's everyone. But the leaders need to be the carriers of that culture and the passing off of that culture. It starts from you, it trickles down to the leaders underneath you, and then it goes to the entire team. But you need to have a sense of ownership in what you're doing. So for example, right, a hygienist is going to be held accountable in our world for reappointment rate. So when a hygienist sees a patient, they are going to need to reappoint that patient for their next visit to increase our retention. And so in that situation, we want the hygienist to take ownership of their reappointment rate. We don't want them to just do the process of reappointing. We want them to own the process of reappointing so that the result is their result. And they are the same amount of care that you have towards the practice. They have maybe 80% of that care towards the things that are their job or their responsibility, which in this case is sense of ownership over the reappointment rate, right? So you want the hygienist to be annoyed with missing their reappointment rate. You want them to be like, that patient didn't reappoint for this reason, and like that irks me the same way that things at the practice irk you. So this sense of ownership is something that needs to be cultivated with the team. And that comes through clarity, right? These are the things that you are measured by. That's important to give them. But then that's also a cultural component that you need to bring, is empowering your team to own things and to bring that sense of ownership into the workplace. But that's a huge thing that also needs to be kind of a big part of this episode, and a big part of what you do is fostering a sense of ownership and empowering your team members to own the things that they're doing with that sense of ownership.
The two halves of this that I see, that I immediately go to, is number one, like the ooey gooey cultural stuff of like core values that people have
Yeah.
buy-in with. That is the stuff that really leads to like complete team buy-in over time. And it is harder. It's like we've done whole episodes on this, and like a whole process for developing core values, teaching those, reinforcing those, showing what those look, documenting and reinforcing what it looks like to live those core values. But I also love the very tactical other side of this, of reporting on metrics that they need to own. So it's like, for instance, patients that left, maybe a daily report or a weekly report, that the hygienist has to create and give to the office manager, give to the dentist, or report to the team, is patients who left without a next appointment.
Yeah.
And so just having to track and then report it, and like the standard is that it should be as close to zero as possible. It's like you have, you set the standard in your office. Now by observing it and reporting it, it creates the sense of ownership, because it's a game. It's a thing that they have to own in front of other people, and there's social pressure, and there's this pride in what you're doing. So finding those little teeny things that they get to take ownership on, because they have to bring it back and have their report card. That's the kind of thing that you can start to engineer and come up with.
Yeah, and I think, something that I thought of is like, well, their bonus, right? Like if you have a bonus program, then it's like, now it's their money or their earning or their income, right? So it's like, that is even more ownership, right? So there's levels to this. But I do think that like, that foundational concept. So now I think we've talked about the sense of ownership. Richard, anything else from a dentist perspective? I think the question that I have before we sort of turn off is it clear to everyone in the audience what a sense of ownership is and how to cultivate it? Because I think that's where, for me, it's one of our core values. It's something Alex has talked about so much. Like, it's something that's just so natural to me that it's kind of hard for me to like say like, is this clear? Is it clear what a sense of ownership is and how to generate that feeling within your team? Because I feel like I know it. I live, eat, sleep, breathe that. But like,
Right.
is that something that the audience, maybe hearing this for the first time, is it clear to them?
I think I don't think I've ever said this definition of ownership before, which is, you are mad or frustrated when it isn't done right. In my mind, that's a very operational, like, litmus test
Yeah.
for, does the team member have ownership? Are they annoyed when this thing that is their responsibility is not done right, whether by themselves or by someone else, because they own it?
Yeah. And I think care, right? Do they have a higher than W-2 employee who just clocks in, clocks out without care? Like, do they have care behind what they're doing, right? Because I think that like you think about it from the practice team member's perspective. Like I gave a talk about this, and I got some negative feedback from someone who's like, team members are just coming to clock in, clock out. They're coming for the paycheck. Like all this other stuff you're saying is not true. And I was like, actually, that's not my experience. My experience is bringing, like, there's a sense of purpose behind what you're doing day in, day out, right? If you're a hygienist, you understand that my purpose is to treat patients well. And I care about bringing them back on time, because if they don't make that next appointment before they walk out, there's a 10% chance they're going to get their cleaning done on time. So like, I care about reappointing them, right? So it's like, I think if we just make it simple, and it's like, it's just care. Does your team care beyond just doing what's required for the paycheck? Do they have more of a care And have you kind of gotten them bought into the greater purpose behind what you're doing so that they can truly like have that same level of care about, what they're responsible for as you would have about just owning the practice and the performance in general?
Um, so now I'm thinking about care, and I want to break it into three things that you
Good.
can
There we go. Yeah. Go
operationalize
ahead.
real quick. So first is, do they understand why they are
Yes.
doing a thing, like what it impacts if you do or you don't do it. Um, and then it goes into, well, so what? Okay, here's why we do it. Who does it impact? And I think if they have a sense of purpose, then in what this does for the patient, in then all of a sudden it's like connected to what we're doing overall, this purpose of what we're doing. So why we're doing it, but then I care about this purpose. And then lastly, tied into the team, the other people around you. And is there a sense of, I care about my team members and I want to pull my weight because it feels good to work here and I want to keep my job and I want to enjoy coming to work each day. And so if you can tie the why with a sense of purpose and a sense of team, then it makes it easier for them to care. And if they don't care about their team members, they don't feel like dentistry matters to themselves or to the patient, and they don't know why they're doing anything, then yeah, they're never going to care about it more than a W-2 employee.
Yeah. And so I think, Richard, so one of the things that you talked about that I just deeply believe in is the purpose and the why behind what we're doing. Right? So like that for me is like a very natural thing because the hardest, like, what are the C's on my schedule? The C's on my schedule are the things that I don't understand the purpose of. If I can't
Mm,
get bought into the purpose behind the thing, I feel like it's just the biggest chore that doesn't have there's no why, there's no compelling reason to do it. Right? So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, like using a checklist or doing extra things or adding things to your plate or whatever we're talking about, delegating or offloading to your team, that's extra work, right? So their initial resistance is going to be, I'm just doing all this extra work. I'm getting paid the same. I'm now doing more work. Why? Right? So it's like you got to show them the why behind what you're trying to do so they're like, all right, I totally get it. We're trying to provide a great experience for the patient. So in service of that goal, I'm going to do whatever is being asked additional. And so I think that like that, I just want to say I totally agree with your perspective. And I just really want to double click on the importance of why. Communicating the purpose behind things is going to be that first step to get people like moving in the direction that you want them to move.
100%. And going back to the ABC framework, maybe there are other team members who do care about the things that you care less about. So, documentation or OSHA or like stuff that like maybe you and I might like not be exciting to care about. Maybe they do. Maybe they like that kind of stuff and they do care. And so that is where that fit of empowering other people can be synergistic. And you don't have to assume that just because I hate it, someone else will.
Yeah. And so now, Richard, I want to tie this back to what we were talking about at the beginning. So at the beginning, we were talking about this idea that growing a practice is like rolling a lot of boulders up hills. And so, Richard, maybe can you make that more tangible for our audience? So like, what about the process of growing a practice, the process of leading a practice is just a ton of work, like the boulder up the hill. Maybe let's like get more tangible on that analogy. And then we'll layer on the idea of having your team help you with all of that load. But maybe first for our audience, like, from your perspective, what is all of the work required to kind of own, manage, and grow a practice?
Um, there is administration and management. And I feel like those two things are the things that are a lot of work and therefore are things that and they're very different. Administration is a lot of the tedious things that need to be done. And then management is the checking of performance and what other people need to do, hiring, managing other people. So doing the stuff and managing people. And if you can create space for other people to learn how to do both of those. At the beginning, you might be doing both, and then you delegate the administration. Then you train other people how to manage other people. Those are skills. Then all of a sudden, you begin to create leaders. And then eventually, culture. Can I train other people how to not only buy into the culture themselves, but help someone new who comes into your office to buy into the culture, reinforce it to other team members, and that is where your team has room to go up this ladder of leadership, of owning what their role is, leading other people and managing other people, and leading the culture in the office and making it a better place to work. There's so much potential in all of that.
Yeah, and I think you totally nailed it there. And I think the thing that I really want to just end on from my perspective is this idea of leverage, right? If you are trying to grow, you need leverage. You are putting a lot of force into the world to have your practice operate differently, provide a great patient experience, have a great culture, have all these managed processes and systems that make it more scalable. And all of this, that's like you are changing reality of how the office is currently being operated to a future way that's much better but much more sophisticated and complicated. And so think about how much effort that is, and think about how much energy needs to be put into the world for that to happen. You can put in all that energy yourself, or you can use a team of people, and all of you guys are putting in that type of energy to make that happen. You have much more leverage, and you have much more ability to influence change and create momentum and truly make what you want happen if you are using other people's energy alongside your own energy. If you are only using your own energy, there's only so much progress you can make, and it's going to feel exhausting a lot of the time. But if you are creating a shared sense of community with multiple people who are putting in their energy towards the same outcome, you're going to have more leverage. Your time is going to have more effect. And also, it's also probably going to be a more enjoyable process to not do it alone. And so that's where, we just really believe in this idea of you have a goal for your practice, you have a vision, you have a direction, and then you get leaders on board with that direction and you grow as a team, and we do a team-led growth approach. And, that's like really our big philosophy at Shared Practices. And I think the thing that we understand is that the effort that the owner has to put in is significantly less compared to the outcome in a team-led approach than, just a founder-led or an owner-led approach.
Love it. I couldn't say it better myself. Like, leverage is the fun part of being a business owner, because you do it once and now you don't have to do it again.
Yes.
And the more of those tasks you can do, and training the team to lead is fundamentally like the best version of that, then all of a sudden you can accelerate, you can move forward, you can build something. George, this has been awesome. I've loved this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last thing I just want to leave people with is be patient, right? Be committed and be patient, and just keep showing up and trying to build this. And then eventually you'll see that your other team members will catch on, but it's not going to happen right away. So just don't expect instant gratification on this one. This is just continued effort over a long period of time, and then you'll really get somewhere.
And I can't help but saying this. If you don't know how to do any of this, get some help. Reach out. This is the whole point of coaching, is that you might not have ever delegated and created leaders and empowered others. And that's what our coaches do all the time, is train office managers. The events we've had in the past that are training office managers, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can help you with this.
Absolutely. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and hopefully you can take this and build leaders within your practice so that you can get to your vision with others' help.
We'll talk to you next time on the Shared Practices podcast.